Hello, this lesson is called Adding Fractions with Different Denominators. Now, just in case you had forgotten, on a fraction, the numerator goes at the top and the denominator goes at the bottom. So when we say adding fractions with different denominators, here's a classic example, 3/4 plus 1/8. Now, some of the things I've seen children do in the past is they've thought, well, 3 add 1 is 4, and then 4 add 8 is 12, so therefore the answer is 4/12, and that is completely wrong. Then they've completely missed the idea that maybe that these are different fractions, so they've thought, well, 3 plus 1 equals 4, and the answer is 4/8 or something like that. So all of those are wrong. What you have to do, first thing you've got to do is you've got to make sure that the denominators are the same. Okay, now to do this you've got to use simplifying fractions and equivalent fractions, which are YouTube lessons which you should find, which I've already done a couple of days ago. So if you haven't done those lessons, then I suggest you stop the video now, go back to those lessons, and then you can come back to this one, because this is a bit tricky unless you know how to do those sorts of things. Right, 3/4, 1/8. What we've got to do is we've got to either make everything quarters, or we've got to make everything eighths. And usually, not always, but usually, you go for the bigger denominator, okay, the biggest denominator. So 1/8 we can leave as 1/8 because that's already in the right format. But what we've got to do is we've got to change 3/4 into eighths. Okay, so we've got to change the 4 into an 8, and then we've got to change the 3 into something such that it's correct. Now, to get from 4 to 8, we can multiply by 2. 4 times 2 is 8. Now, if you remember from the previous lessons, whatever you do to the bottom of the fraction, you have to do to the top of the fraction. You have to do the same. You have to be equitable. So 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, so now let's just make this a little tidier. What we now have is, instead of saying 3/4 plus 1/8, we've actually got 6/8 plus 1/8. And now we can just add the top two numbers, so 6 add 1 is 7, and then the bottom numbers stay the same, so 7/8. Okay, now what I'll do is I will set this example up using the bar model and show you how you can use the bar model to do this example. Okay, so let's start with 3/4. Okay, so 3/4 we've got squiggle, squiggle, and squiggle. Now, the problem is we want to add 1/8, okay, but we haven't got eighths, we've got quarters. But by now you should know that if you just chop these in half, now that is 1/8, that bit, can you see that? Yes, and this bit is 1/8 as well. Okay, so there's 3/4, and I will add 1/8, and I'll just use dots rather than squiggles so that it's easy to differentiate. Okay, so 3/4 is the squiggles, 1/8 is the the dots. And so the final answer, well, you can't just say 3/4 plus 1/8 because that's what the question is. So let's just do it in eighths. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and so that's the answer. So 3/4 plus 1/8 equals 7/8. Okay, example number 2. Now, this is a little bit trickier. So we've got 1/3 plus 1/4. The problem is that you can't use either of those, because if you use thirds, then you can't get quarters into thirds. And if you use quarters, then the other one doesn't work either. So what you've got to do is you've got to think of a number that 3 will go into and 4 will go into. Okay, so in other words, what number are 3 and 4 factors? And factors means numbers which multiply together. Now the easiest way to do this is to take these two numbers, these two denominators, and just simply multiply them. So 3 times 4 is 12. And then another one for this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this is going to represent thirds, and this one with the dotted line is going to represent quarters. Okay, so 1/3 is how many twelfths? So what do we multiply 3 by to get 12? 3, 6, 9, 12. Look, 3, 6, 9, 12. We multiply it by 4. So therefore, we've got to multiply this by 4 as well. 4 times 1 is 4. Okay? And now, do the same for the other fraction. What do we multiply 4 by to get to 12? And let's just get rid of that. So, what do we multiply 4 by? 4, 8, 12. We multiply it by 3. So therefore 4 times 3 is 12. So if that's the case, the top number, the numerator, has to be multiplied by 3 as well. 1 times 3 is 3. Okay. And if you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, the 3 and the 4, and then the 4 and the 3, there's just the same numbers reversed. Yes, that does work. That is how it's supposed to work, and that's what happens. So now, because they've got the same denominator, you've got 4/12 plus 3/12. Well, 4 plus 3 is 7. So therefore, the answer, oops, that's not going to work, is it? Equals 7 and 12 on the denominator. So 4/12 plus 3/12 is 7/12. But if you go back to the original question, 1/3 plus 1/4 is 7/12. Now I'm not going to do it now, but if you wanted to, you could do everything that we've done using the bar model. In fact, yes, I am going to do it now. Yes, why not? So let's do a third. So if we've got a third, we've got that, okay? And then we're going to add a quarter. And when we add a quarter, okay, so we're going to add this amount to this amount. Now I'm not going to put the squiggles in because that will make it a bit messy. Now, as I said, you can't add that to that, and you can't add that to that because they're different sizes. Each section is a different size. But what we've got to do is we've got to make each one of them twelfths, so therefore that will be okay. So for this one, we put 4 in each box, and then we put 4 in this box, and we put 4 in this box. Okay, so those dots tell you where the thirds were, but now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, and now we can put the squiggles in, so we'll put 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4/12. Now for this one, remember, you've got to have the same amount. We've got to still end up with 12ths. And to do that, we've got to have, just one moment. Okay, and to do that, each one has got to be divided up into 3. So we've got 3 there, and 3 just there, and 3 just there, and then 3 in the last bit rather, just there. And remember, I drew this line because that shows us that represents 1/4. Remember, this is representing 1/3, and this is representing 1/4. So 1/4 is 1, 2, 3/12, which is what we've got there. So now, to add them together, all I need to do is to take these 3 boxes and transfer them up to the top box. And again, I'll do dots to represent so that we can see the different ones. So I've got to bring 3 of them up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the answer is 7/12. Okay. Yes, good. I'm glad I did that because that does. I'm hoping that that makes it a little clearer. Okay. I think this is going to be the last example, and now this is much more difficult because now we've got 3 fractions, we've got 3 different denominators, and so now we've got to work out a denominator which we can use that they will all go into. Now that wasn't very clearly explained. What was I going to say? We're going to use a denominator that 3 is a factor of, that 2 is a factor of, and that 5 is a factor of. Okay, so think of your 3 times table, your 2's and your 5's. Now if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 so far, well 10, that will divide, 5 goes into 10 and 2 goes into 10 but not 3. 11, 12, that's those 2. 13, 14, 15 is those 2. Okay, but we're really struggling at the moment to find one that everything will go into. The easiest and the quickest way is to take the denominators 3 and multiply them, 2, and multiply that looks a bit wrong, and 5. Okay, so 3 times 2 is 6, times 5 is 30. Okay, if you don't believe me, 5 times 2 is 10, times 3 is 30, or 5 times 3 is 15, times 2 is 30. So therefore, that is our new denominator. Okay, so each one of these fractions is now going to be 30ths instead of thirds and halves and fifths. Okay, so the next step, once you've worked that out, the next step is to then decide on the equivalent fractions. So with thirds, what do I multiply 3 by to get 30? And hopefully the obvious answer is 10. So therefore 10 times 1 is 10. Okay. Now for halves, what do I multiply 2 by to get to 30? Okay, so 2 times 15. So for this one we're multiplying by 15. Okay, and remember, whatever you do to the bottom part, you have to do to the top part as well. So if we multiply 2 by 15, we've got to multiply 1 by 15, and there the answer of course is 15. And then for the final one, just get rid of that, whoops. For the final one, 5, what do we multiply 5 by? We multiply 5 by 6. 5 times 6 is 30. So therefore we've got to multiply the top by 6. So 6 times 1 is 6. Okay, so what we had was a third plus a half plus a fifth, and now we've got 10/30ths plus 15/30ths plus 6/30ths. So the answer to that is 10 add 15 is 25, 31. So the answer is 31/30ths. Now at this point some of you are thinking, wait a minute, the numerator is bigger. Okay, it is, yeah. So now if you wanted to, you could leave it like that and that would be correct, but 31/30ths is one whole one and just one 30th. Okay, hope that's all right. Okay, so that's the end of the adding fractions with different denominators lesson. That was quite tricky, I will admit. The questions that you have to do in the next step, some of those are quite tricky too. If you have any problems, as always, you can email me, you can send me a message on the Class Dojo, or you can use Ask Mr. Smales, any one of those methods to contact me, and I will be delighted to help you out. Good luck with those, and see you soon.